Blah, 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 blah. Dante's Inferno, more like Dumbte's Chumferno. Am I right, guys?
Oh, Drew.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Agreed, fella.
So Dante basically writes this story about his own journey through hell to what? Talk about the Catholic Church?
Not necessarily. It actually represents more humanist and Renaissance perspectives because of its divergence away from the teachings of the Church and instead toward the human experience and the study of the Roman and Greek classics.
It also comments on the political scene at the time, which you can see through Dante's placement of at the time, modern political or religious leaders in different circles of hell. It's his way of commenting on the corruption in Florence.
Dante's idea of the Inferno is also important in the context of the book itself, not just the social historical context or implications. The actual content of the book is a way of utilizing oxymorons, paradoxes, and illusions to portray the metaphor of the journey to enlightenment, whatever that enlightenment looks like. The journey through the Inferno isn't just the story of a guy going through hell, but a way of illustrating the difficulty and emotion behind overcoming a challenge to become more enlightened.
That makes sense. I guess we should start exploring the Inferno?
Yes.
Dante finds himself lost in a dark and frightening forest, when suddenly he comes upon a hill. Trying to climb, he is forced down by three beasts and wanders through the forest. He is greeted by Virgil, who tells Dante that Beatrice, Dante's late lover who heard of Dante's struggle, sent for Virgil to guide Dante through the Inferno to bring him to heaven.
Reaching a gate, Dante is told by Virgil that the journey will be treacherous, but Dante is motivated by his love for Beatrice. The gate carries an inscription that reads, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." Despite the warning, the two push onward.
Master, what sound can this be that I hear? And who the folk, thus whelmed in misery?
Virgil responds that these are souls who were neither good nor evil, including the indifferent angels who picked neither God nor Lucifer. The souls were not desired by heaven nor hell, so they experienced punishment outside the true beginnings of the Inferno.
Passing through those forced to be stung eternally by hornets and wasps, Dante and Virgil reach the end of the vestibule of the indifferent.
They encounter Charon, the ferryman, who takes souls across the Acheron into the Inferno. He agrees to take Dante and Virgil, but warns them about the journey ahead.
Dante and Virgil proceed down the river.
Dante and Virgil enter the first circle, Limbo, the circle made for souls that lived before Christ and are pagan.
Hence he drew forth the shade of the first parent, and that of his son Abel, and of Noah, of Moses the lawgiver, and the obedient.
Once Virgil and Dante have entered Limbo, the circle made for souls that lived prior to Christ, Dante makes many biblical allusions to Abel, Noah, and Moses, and describes them as the first parent, which implies that although they were unbaptized, they were still extremely significant figures in the development of the Christian faith. Therefore, those stuck in limbo are not regarded by Dante as sinful in principle, but rather sinful because they are not regarded in the eyes of God as an emblem of the Christian religion, serving for automatic grounds of damnation, but not torture or punishment.
Aside from religious figures, they also come across many well-known poets and philosophers.
That one is Homer, poet sovereign. He who comes next is Horace, the satirist, and the third is Ovid, and the last is Lucan.
In the majority of Dante's time in Limbo, he lists many historical figures and philosophers that he believes belong there, such as Homer and Horace. Homer lived before Christ, and although Horace lived after Christ, he was still regarded as a pagan and therefore does not qualify for salvation, or rather, does not qualify in Dante's perspective. This prevents that regardless of the virtuous morals that all of them write of, whether they are a poet sovereign or a satirist, they are still believed to belong in the Inferno. Hence, morality on earth does not guarantee entrance into Paradiso upon reaching the afterlife, nor does being sinful guarantee entrance into hell. It is one factor upon many others, baptism and fortune, that determine the fate of the dead.
Exiting Limbo, Dante goes further and finds Minos. This, he describes.
There Minos sits, grinning, grotesque, inhales. He examines each lost soul as it arrives and delivers his verdict with his coming toil. A coiling tale.
When Dante enters the second circle of hell, which contains the lustful, he encounters Minos, the judge of sinners who decides their punishment. This allusion to Minos, a cruel tyrant who became the judge of the underworld for Hades in Greek mythology, is reflected in Inferno. Combined with the reverence of classics during Dante's time, this allusion ultimately creates an atmosphere of fear and reverence for the judge and emphasizes the otherworldly nature of hell.
After passing Minos, Dante enters the second circle of the Inferno, where the lustful are whirled and smited by a great wind. Dante speaks to some of the lustful sinners, and notices many historical and mythological figures.
Paris I saw, Tristan, in more than 1,000 shades did he name and point out with his finger whom love had separated from our life.
During Dante's exploration of the circle, he sees Paris and Tristan, two lovers whose stories of love led to their deaths. Paris and Helen's romance caused the Trojan War, which eventually leads to the two's death. Tristan accidentally drinks a love potion and falls in love with Isolde, beginning a forbidden relationship. This relationship becomes his death sentence. Dante's allusion to Tristan and Paris conveys the idea that an excess of love can lead to suffering and suggests these souls in the second circle have all fallen to lust and died pitifully. These ideas are mirrored in the descriptor of the circle. More than 1,000 shades did he name.
Dante speaks to Francesca and Paul, who tell their tragic tale of forbidden love. So overcome by their story, Dante faints, and he and Virgil must move on to the next ring.
The savage Cerberus, a monster drear, is appeased as when his meat he gnaws, and all forgets all else around.
The first beast that Dante and Virgil encounter in Circle 3 is Cerberus. This alludes to the guard of the underworld from Greek mythology, whose job is to prevent the dead from leaving and the living from entering. However, because Dante can enter with Virgil by distracting Cerberus with meat, Cerberus further illustrates the corruption and sinful nature of gluttony. Cerberus gluttonously takes the meat, and forgetting his only task of the ring, demonstrates the incompetence and harmful nature of the sin, representing how it can distract and endanger others.
In this circle, Dante is approached by a soul who had lived in Florence.
As Fiacco, me your citizens named of yore, and for the damned sin of gluttony I, as thou seemst, am beaten by this shower. No solitary woeful soul am I, for all of these who endure the self-same doom, for the same fault.
Chaco introduces himself as a fellow Florentine and explains to Dante that he is punished for gluttony. By alluding to his town of Florence, Dante expresses his distaste for the growing corruption and implies that Florence is full of gluttons who will meet a similar fate in the Inferno. By having the gluttons constantly feel the pain of hail and rain, their eternal punishment represents their eternal hunger for more during their lives.
Chaco warns Dante about the journey before him, providing Dante with information about the future. Dante keeps this in mind as he and Virgil leave the third circle.
Dante and Virgil enter the fourth circle, where they encounter Plutus, who tries to stop them from passing. However, Virgil speaks to Plutus, and the two of them carry on.
Justice of God! Ah! Who heaps up so many new toils and sufferings as I beheld? And why doth our transgression waste us so?
As Dante and Virgil descend into the fourth circle of hell, Dante makes an allusion to God in heaven, making a cry for help. His desperate search for any superior being to come to his aid symbolizes the utter helplessness those trapped in hell must endure. Dante is not a sinner. He has not experienced the new toils of one, nor the sufferings of those he observes on his treacherous journey. However, by using the word our when referring to transgression, Dante subsequently implies that he now feels included collectively with the sinners, as if he is being overtaken by the sin around him. His identity as a believer in God is now under test since he has departed from God's provision when in the Inferno. He even begins to question whether God tries to help the sinners, why God lets them suffer and waste away, and why God will not take the heaps of grief and sadness he feels creeping up into him as he spirals downwards into anxiety and fear. He displays to the reader that sinners are both figuratively and literally in the dark, out of sight from even the bringer of peace and light, God in heaven or Paradiso.
They see sinners rolling heavy stones up hills, but which remain stagnant as other sinners attempt to roll the stone in the opposite direction. They are forced to roll them for eternity here. Across the marshy river Styx in the fifth circle, the wrathful bite and claw at each other, and in the river the sullen gurgle and choke.
The marsh it makes, which has the name of Styx, is tristful brooklet, when it has descended down to the foot of the malign grey shores, and I, who stood intent upon beholding, saw people mud bespread in that lagoon, all of them naked with an angry look.
Throughout his Inferno, Dante makes allusions to many rivers that flow through hell, one in particular being the river Styx. In Greek mythology, this river transports the newly dead from the living world, the sinners on earth, to hell, the underworld. By alluding to this, he emphasizes the harsh and unforgiving nature of the fourth and fifth circle. He details the gruesome conditions of sinners in or near the river as naked and angry, with skin smeared in mud. However, he also makes quite clear that the river is not any more unusually torturous than the rest of hell. It is tristful, a truthful and realistic exposure of sin. Therefore, the river Styx is symbolic of not only the harsh nature of hell, but also the reality of its unforgiving nature.
Passing these sinners, Dante and Virgil realize they need help crossing the river. They ask Phlegyas, a boatman, who agrees to take them across.
Phlegyas, the madman, blew his rage among those muddy marshes like a cheat deceived, or like a fool at some imagined wrong.
When Dante and Virgil travel through the fifth circle, they meet Phlegyas. Phlegyas was a king in Greek mythology who torched Apollo's temple because he believed Apollo killed his daughter, causing Apollo to then kill him. The description of Phlegyas reflects the sins of the inhabitants of the fifth circle and their punishment, serving others at their request, emphasizes how the wrong will be punished for their wrongdoing through a punishment of equal torture. This description of the marshes emphasizes the immortality of the inhabitants of hell.
Dante and Virgil exit the boat and reach the gates of Dis.
The city called Dis lies just ahead. The heavy citizens, the swarming crowds of hell's metropolis.
I already see the glow of its red mosques, as if they came hot from the forge to smolder in this valley.
When Dante and Virgil near the city of Dis, they see the populated city and the glow of the red mosques. Mosques are a house of prayer in Islam. Their allusion to Islam reflects the negative view of Muslims because they are present in hell and implies its believers as heretics. Islam's negative portrayal in Inferno reflects the cultural context in which this text was written.
However, Virgil and Dante are turned away from the gates, forcing them to find a different entry into the city of Dis.
Dante and Virgil realize they must wait for divine aid to enter into the city of Dis and encounter the three Furies.
Call Medusa that we may change him to stone. Too lightly we let Theseus go free.
While waiting for divine aid, Dante and Virgil meet the three Furies, Tisiphone, Megara, and Alecto, who appear in Greek mythology as the goddesses of vengeance. The allusion to these monsters are another crossover from Greek mythology, and they emphasize the fear and the otherworldly nature of hell. Furthermore, their desire for violence reflects the degree of wrath present within the wrathful. Although in Greek mythology Medusa died, her presence in hell suggests the ever-present nature of wrath.
The Furies are scared off by a messenger from heaven who speaks to the Furies.
Why do you butt against fate's ordinance? Your Cerberus, if you recall, still wears his throat and chin peeled for such arrogance.
When Dante and Virgil are saved by the angel asks the Erinyes a rhetorical question. He alludes to Cerberus, the guard dog who appeared in Circle 3. His job is to prevent the living from entering and keeping the dead from leaving. The description of Cerberus, with his throat and chin peeled, emphasizes the power of the divine and continues the theme of punishment.
Dante and Virgil enter the city of Dis and make their way to the sixth circle, where the heretics are found.
The heretics are kept in fiery tombs. Dante and Virgil walk around and speak to some of the souls, who provide Dante with information about the future. However, their punishment restricts them to seeing only the far distant future.
Dante and Virgil then exit the sixth circle and make their way to the seventh.
As they approach the seventh circle, an overpowering stench causes them to pause. After they get accustomed to the smell, the two carry onward.
Virgil informs Dante of the structure of the seventh circle and how the violent sinners are divided into three groups: violence against one's neighbor, violence against oneself, and violence against God.
You'll avoid the Minotaur at the entrance of the seventh circle and see a few centaurs, Chiron, Nisus, and others. Dante and Virgil ask Nisus for help, being unable to cross the boiling river of blood that punishes those who are violent against their neighbors.
So grows its depth more great, believe me, towards the opposite extreme, until again its circling course attains the place where tyrants must lament. Supreme justice upon that side involves and pains, with Attila, once of the world the pest, Ferris, and Sextus.
Dante illustrates the way sinners let violence drown out other aspects of their lives through the symbolism of the violence ring. Placing extreme tyrants where the river is deepest alludes to the extent of violent actions taken by those there. This allows the punishment to be interpreted as a representation of the relentless violence the sinners took against others in their lives, and the extremity of that violence. Secondly, Dante portrays his Florentine political and religious views by alluding to extreme tyrants. By mentioning Attila, Paris, and Sextus, 3 individuals who attacked parts of Italy, Dante conveys the notion that the worst sinners are those who invade Italy, the center of Catholicism.
Nessus takes Virgil and Dante to a place where they can continue, and the two enter the tangled wood of the violent against oneself.
Virgil shows Dante that the trees are the souls of the violent sinners who committed suicide, who have been denied the right to a body. The trees are hurt and tortured as punishment by harpies, who bite and claw at the branches and leaves. Dante is interested in talking to one of those souls, and after asking the forest, one speaks up.
For I am he who held both keys and ward of Frederick's heart, and turned them how I would, and softly oped it, and softly barred, till scarce another in his counsel stood. No choice is made of where it shall be thrown within the wood, but where by chance 'tis flung, it germinates like seed of spelt that's sown. The forest tree, it grows from sapling young, eating its leaves, the harpies cause it pain, in open loopholes whence its sighs are wrung.
Dante illustrates how devotion to the Pope does not excuse sinful behavior by alluding to the disgrace of Pier Delvine when talking with his soul in the forest of those who committed suicide. Delvine briefly mentions the reason for his being in hell. He was rumored to have betrayed Emperor Frederick II for the Pope, and after being disgraced, took his own life. This disgracement illustrates how it is still important to live honestly, and that even though he acted with loyalty toward the Pope, that does not excuse him from his punishment for suicide. Dante also alludes to harpies, which, in stories, destroyed and defiled food and goods. Thus, the harpies help symbolize the wasted potential and life of those who committed suicide.
After conversing with another soul in the tangled wood, Dante and Virgil leave for the next part of the seventh circle.
In the third ring of the seventh circle, there are 2 zones for sinners who are punished in an area of blazing sands under a hot, fiery rain.
Dante speaks to punished souls about corruption and modern life in Florence before heading out of the ring. Virgil calls for Chiron, a serpent man who flies the 2 of them to the 8th circle.
Dante and Virgil enter the first bolgia of the 8th circle of hell. The 8th circle is also known as Malebolge, or fraud. It has 10 ditches, or bolgias. They first witness the seducers and panderers in the first bolgia, and then the flatterers in the second bolgia.
Unless thy features do belie thee much, Vindiccio art thou. But what brings thee into this bitter seasoning?
Unwillingly I answer to thy words, but thy clear speech that to my mind recalls the world I once inhabited constrains me.
Upon Dante and Virgil entering the first of the 8th circle's 10 trenches, Dante's recognition of fellow Italian follows his continual trend of relating his and sinners' experiences back to his home country on Earth with Italian allusions, showing concern for earthly matters even while on a fantastical journey through hell. This serves as a representation to mankind's natural tendency to show more concern for worldly matters over the afterlife. Vindiccio does not want to be known to Dante because sinners in this trench are human traffickers that sell women, but he is immortalized anyway in the Inferno, as he is compelled by Dante's clear speech, which has been previously used by predominantly by Virgil to compel sinners and guardians to aid them through their journey. By showing his growth through his newfound compelling language, which previously was used mostly by Virgil, Dante places himself on the level of this ancient poet, exemplifying the human nature of inflating one's own accomplishments.
After the first and second Bolgias, they enter the third of the Simoniacs.
What treasures from St. Peter at the first our Lord demanded when he put the keys into his charge. Surely he asked no more, but follow me. Nor Peter, nor the rest, or gold, or silver, or Matthias took, when lots were cast upon the forfeit placed of the condemned soul. Abide thou then, thy punishment is right of merited.
In the third trench, where people are punished for selling and gaining money from church offices, Dante criticizes Pope Nicholas III for his unfair and greedy practices of nepotism and simony, giving religious offices to friends or for money, and references when Jesus gave the keys to heaven to St. Peter for no charge. His use of a biblical allusion to criticize a real pope, as well as his acceptance that thy punishment of right is merited, illustrates Dante's learned behavior to place trust in God and not pity sinners for their wrongdoings, as pitying those punished by God is essentially an offense to God, as well as Dante's predominance of Christian beliefs throughout his poem. The quote ultimately emphasizes the inevitability of karma and justice.
After traversing through the rest of the Bolgias, sorcerers, barators, hypocrites, thieves, and counselors of fraud, they enter the ninth and final circle of hell.
The ninth circle of hell is the deepest circle, where the traitors are damned. Traitors to their kindred, traitors to their country, traitors to Botlema, and traitors to Judeca.
Dante hears the stories of the many betrayals that led individuals to end up in this circle after death.
Oh, thou Pisa, shame of all thy people, who their dwelling make in that fair region, where the Italian voice is heard.
After hearing the tale of Count Ugolino, an Italian from Pisa who betrayed his political party of the Ghibellines, supporting Roman Emperor, to be a Guelph, supporting Catholic Pope, and was consequently imprisoned with his sons, Dante shames the people who their dwelling make in this region of Italy. He criticizes not only the Ghibellines, like Archbishop Ruggieri, who imprisoned Ugolino, but the entirety of Pisa by claiming that Ugolino had no right to eat his sons' bodies while imprisoned, hoping the whole region is submerged by a flood. Dante's recurring concerns with Italian political matters, even while journeying in hell, is apparent as he criticizes a rivaling political faction and a town through the anecdote of a sinner, ultimately depicting the concern that humans have for earthly matters rather than piousness.
Oh, what a sight! How passing strange it seemed when I did spy upon his head 3 faces, one in the front of hue vermilion, the other 2 with this midway each shoulder joined at the crest. The right twixt wan and yellow seemed, the left to look on, such as come from whence old Nile stoops to the lowlands.
Dante directly alludes to Lucifer, or Satan, a character in Christianity who rebelled against God and his plan of salvation whilst trying to achieve power. He was an angel with beautiful features in heaven, but after being cast into the ninth circle of hell, his features became monstrous, such as his 3 faces that each chew on different sinners. The description of his 3 faces in one character serves as an evil version of the Holy Trinity, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, and also represents the 3 categories of sin as seen in the first canto, with the animals: incontinence, violence, and fraud. Dante's use of this adverse Holy Trinity represents sin as a contradiction of God's will, as the worst sinners in Christianity are those that are seen furthest from God's love. I messed up that last part.
In the end, Dante and Virgil climb down Satan's legs and eventually climb up to the shores of Mount Purgatorio. Thus, after the ninth circle, they find a way to escape hell.
Well, that was
Dark?
Misery-inducing?
Hellish?
Wow, Sophie. How original.
Well, I was gonna say it was certainly a Chumferno.
Agreed. I think it's interesting, though.
That's one way to put it.
But guys, how are we gonna get out?
That's a great question.
Wait, we're gonna have to go through the whole thing, aren't we?
Yup.
Well, thanks a lot, Dante.